All right, what's up, guys? Welcome to the No Easy Buckets podcast. First episode in a long time. First kind of new path forward here on our NBA channel. So this is Jacob coming to you from out west in Warriors country, even though I'm a Grizzlies fan, and then also Blake coming at you from the east, supporting the Knicks today, but also a Grizzlies fan. Season ticket holder.
Oh yeah, 7-year season ticket holder. But since the Grizzlies are out at this point, I got to support the next best team, I guess, in the playoffs, in my opinion. Right?
Yeah.
So hits a little bit home. So I'll support the Knicks. So we'll see.
Yeah, it's good. It's good colors. It's a good hat. I mean, it's kind of like
Good hat.
I mean, the Knicks are kind of like the grit and they're like the Gen Z version of grit and grind. Like they're as grit and grind as you're gonna get in today's NBA with Tibbs and like those guys they
Right.
got. Still, so I feel like if you are looking for a new team to root for, that's who the old school Grizzlies fans would gravitate towards. I'm actually, not forced. I'm privileged to watch these games with my father-in-law, and he's a Warriors fan. And I was kind of worried that I was going to have to cheer for the Warriors once the Grizzlies
God.
got eliminated, and I was bummed about that. But then they faced the team that beat us, the Lakers. So I've actually found it not as hard to root for the Warriors since I'm getting to root against the Lakers. But we do have some Warriors hate to talk about in this pod,
Yes.
because that is what gets the people going. They deserve it. You won your championships, so just shut up and take the hate. But let's go ahead and get started here with one of the Warriors' favorite players in the league, and that's Dillon Brooks. So, obviously being Memphis fans, we followed this guy. I mean, he's the longest tenured Grizzly. He's the longest tenured Grizzly on the team, or, potentially, probably he won't be any longer, but he's been here for about 6 years. He kind of bridged the gap between the end of the grit and grind era, the last year with Mark and Mike, to then, when Jaren got drafted and the new regime came in after that, the eventuality of Ja and Bane and all those players. He's been here the long haul as a second round pick. A guy that worked his butt off. He was in the national championship with Oregon against UNC, I think, that year. Kind of a grinder. Like, he really fit the Grizzlies' personality, especially that the era that he came in. But then also he set the tone kind of for the young player attitude over the last few years with Memphis, and he's been a fan favorite. You always have a soft spot for those type of guys that maybe nationally no one knows about, who they work hard. They're like local celebrities. They do the dirty work. They don't ask for a lot of I guess praise for that. And so he was kind of a local favorite. But then as these things go, once you start getting success and getting in these moments, and these players start not delivering or showing out or getting into some antics that we'll talk about here, but it starts to sour. And we've got the report the other day that the Grizzlies, under any circumstances, will not be bringing back Dillon Brooks, which we'll start right there with this report, and we'll slightly backtrack and then go forward, kind of the end of the season and then looking forward. But the report from SHAMS was that the Grizzlies would not be bringing back Dillon Brooks under any circumstance. It also touched on the contract talks, extension talks that happened earlier in the season between the Grizzlies and Brooks that that Brooks seemed to not be interested in, and makes sense. He was at that point planning to get a big contract later in free agency, and now we're here where both Dillon Brooks' agent and the Grizzlies are basically denying this report from Shams. So I have my own thoughts on it. I made some videos on it, but I want to see what you thought and kind of where you think, who do you think this report came from?
So I do want to touch on Dillon Brooks a little bit in terms of
Yeah.
he's been the perfect transition guy for the Grizzlies, right? Like you mentioned him being part of the grit and grind era, and now we're in the more, I would say, modernized. This is where the future of the Grizzlies is going, right? So he's been the perfect. I'm going to set the tone. I want to make sure that I shepherd these younger players in the right direction. But you mentioned the success and it kind of getting to his head a little bit, where sometimes it's better to work in silence than talk of some smack against one of the teams that have one of the bigger followings at least in the U.S., right? Probably globally,
Yeah.
with LeBron being on the team. So I think as he mentioned, he did poke the bear and it came back to bite him in the ass. Regarding the Shams report, I do feel like this was primarily Shams looking to kind of start a media firestorm, if you will, right? Like, I don't think anybody on the Grizzlies side would use the language, under any circumstances, especially with it being so close to the end of the season, right? You're not in active negotiations to bring a guy back when you just ended the season a couple days before. So I feel like it was more so Shams trying to capitalize on the ever present, DB and the Grizzlies in the action in the forefront and just kind of riding the wave on the DB hate. I think it was just kind of more so, all right, well, I'm just going to run with it.
Yeah, I think it was probably a conversation that he was having with, so like how they basically everything, a lot of these conversations happen under the guise of like league sources, right? It doesn't
Right.
say like who that league source is or where that source, like it, so that could be another agent, that could be Dillon's agent, that could be somebody loosely connected with the Grizzlies, could be somebody loosely connected with the league, could be, another player. It could be like, another player that has a relationship. I mean, who does Shams work with every day at FanDuel TV? Chandler Parsons, who used to play on the Grizzlies and was on the roster one of those years that Dillon Brooks was here, those first couple years, and that's Chandler Parsons, who has, for some reason, I mean, I won't say for some reason because he stated his reasons. Who would have a, I guess, incentive
Who has
to make the
who
Grizzlies
has a
look bad?
vested interest?
Yeah, who has a
Yeah.
vested interest to make the Grizzlies look bad? And I would argue that that's Chandler Parsons. That it would be a could be the culprit there. I mean, I could see Shams feeling comfortable running with a story that Chandler Parsons was the league source. I mean, he's a former player. I believe his agent represents other players, current players. I mean, he was a CAA guy. I don't know if he's still there, but that to me, and honestly, I just kind of thought of that as we were talking, that could be somebody that could release that. But anyway, you know, I think you're right. I think he ran with something that was maybe loosely sourced or sourced enough for today's media, and wanted to stoke the fire a little bit. And I think it kind of made both parties look bad because originally I thought maybe Dillon Brooks' agent would be leaking this, but it also kind of makes Dillon look. It doesn't shed as good of a light on Dillon as he as a report that his own agent would have wanted to. So doubt it came there, and I think what this noise, which will eventually dissipate, what it really will lead to is Dillon Brooks not being on the Grizzlies anymore. Like we all kind of assumed that. The thing is, all these people, nobody paid attention to the exit interviews with the Memphis had last Sunday, which is also the day I think before this report came out. And in those exit interviews, some of the quotes that came out from Dillon, didn't regret anything that he did. I believe those were, these aren't direct quotes. This was kind of the context of what he was talking about. He also dropped some great ones saying that he just needed to get in more of a rhythm and he didn't get enough shots. He needed more shots to get in a rhythm, which, if you look back at last year's Game 6 versus Golden State, the guy shot 28 times. He did drop 30 points, but he shot 28 times. And, he's not the type of player that shoots that much. So anybody that is close to the Grizzlies, media and organization, they know that those quotes are somebody that's leading. He wants to go into this all-season negotiation and get a lot of money. Ramona Shelburne reported from ESPN that he was looking to get around $25 million, which, I mean, I don't know about you, but I wouldn't want to pay Dillon Brooks making $25 million on my team. Any team I think is going to have a problem with that.
I think the craziest thing about this portion of it is the agent calling out Shams directly on Twitter. I think it's
Hashtag
pretty
weirdo.
damning. Yeah, hashtag weirdo. I think that's pretty damning because at the end of the day, I don't know if Shams has tweeted since then, right?
That's a
Like
good thing to check.
I'm looking at it right now. He hasn't tweeted since May 3rd, right? So I don't know if those coincide. Call that the conspiracy theory theory, the
Yeah.
conspiracy theorist in me, right? But at
Hmm.
the end of the day, I feel like if again, you were trying to capitalize on a situation where you thought you could get a lot of views, right? I feel like this is the perfect time to ride the wave, like I was talking about.
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing that for Dylan is he wants more money. He wants to have an expanded role as more than just a 3 and D guy. But I think we've seen what that role looks like. There's been times when Ja's been out or Jaren's been out, and he's kind of had to be the guy, and he can shoot the ball a lot. Doesn't necessarily mean it's going in, right?
Yeah.
His shot creation is a little suspect, right? He
A little.
really isn't just a tad suspect to where like I feel like in his mind I feel like he thinks he's like doing extremely well. But at the end of the day, I feel like that's all he is a 3 and D guy. So if he's expecting to get 25 million a year or have an expanded role on a team as just more than a 3 and D guy, I think he's looking in the wrong league at least because I don't know if there's necessarily a team that would fit
Yeah.
that criteria for him.
No. And, there was a tweet yesterday, and I'll try to throw it up here in the post edit and everything, but there was a tweet from one of the Grizzlies writers. He does some other NBA content, but he did this kind of stat about like one of 18 players in the NBA that fit this criteria of like 40% 3-point shooting, catch and shoot threes, and there was some other criteria. But it was an interesting. It was something that it's one of those analytical filters that gives you a small group of players that do something well, right? Like it's one of those kind of microscopic kind of look at the league. And Dillon was actually number one on that list in whatever criteria that was there. But and that's something I've said all year and multiple years is that Dillon as a catch and shoot 3-point shooter is great. Those are the best shots that he has. The most consistent ones that he hits are the catch and shoot threes,
Just don't think
which
about it, shoot it.
is what you get in this offense. But he's never been one to be okay with that. Whether it's catching a wide open three and dribbling into something else or dribbling into a step back or trying to create in transition. If you've watched Dillon Brooks, like this is a thing too, is that most people don't watch Dillon Brooks. And most people see clips of him punching somebody in the nuts, which he's done a few times, fouling somebody hard, talking some trash, walking into the arena, wearing something, insane. That's what they see of Dillon Brooks. They
Right.
never see, like us watching, and Grizzlies fans know, if you've watched Dillon Brooks try to dribble, not even do anything remotely difficult, but just dribble. The guys can't dribble. Like
No.
I would say he's probably a bottom percent like ball handler in the NBA if you actually had a way to measure that, I guess. And then also too, from a creation standpoint, he can't like dribble and look and pass at the same time. He can't look to
Right.
pass. Like if he's dribbling towards the rim, he's either going to throw it in the stands or try to throw up a shot. And that's not the type of player. Like he has no other. But he also is not content being catch and shoot player. He could make probably 15 to 20 something million being a catch and shoot player with his defensive ability,
Yeah.
but that's just not what he's okay doing. And
Yeah.
I think one of the reports that came out actually today, the day that we're recording, is that the Pistons have some interest. From Mark Stein mentioned the Pistons have interest in Dillon Brooks, and I'd imagine, I don't know why they would a rebuilding
Yeah.
team with a bunch of young guys. Maybe they view him as a guy that can come in, and they probably do view him as a guy that can convince to not take a lot of shots. But we'll see. I really don't know that he's gonna. Maybe a different change of scenery will flip. Sometimes that does help guys. It's almost like a realization of what your market is, and be like, okay, now for the first time ever, it actually sinks in with him. This is the player that I have to be. But the whole time he's in Memphis, and it's one of those things that sucks, is he may never actually be able to do that in Memphis. He may not.
Well,
He may
it's
have
like
to go somewhere else to do it.
it's like changing jobs, right? Like you might think that this is the team that he started his NBA career with,
Yeah.
right? So when you liken it to like a job, if you've been somewhere so long and you're the most tenured guy in your job,
Mm-hmm.
you think, oh, okay, I'm the best. I should be the one that should be creating shots. I should be the one to do this. But I think the reality sets in where you go to another organization where they're like, hey, this is what we do. this is what you're good at. We want you to be a part of our group. I think he's probably going to get that reality check. I hope he gets that reality check. He's an elite defensive player, right? Like, I don't know if he's going to make, all NBA in terms of the defensive team. I know that there were some reports where he can make like all, the third team as a wing
Yeah.
defender, but call it like you want it. But I feel like you said, he's a good 3 and D person. That's what he is. But I feel like
He's mostly
in his
mostly defense, less three,
in yeah,
but
less three.
no.
But in his
That
mind,
is
we'll see.
that is what he is. No, and I think, like you said, like we said, I think the final kind of thought on that, I think, is he will most likely, because I think he's worth it to be on a roster. Some people have joked going overseas. I don't think he's that. I mean, of course, you never know if he doesn't drop the act like that. He may not have a home here, but
Right.
in the league. But I think he'll realize that, given a different locker room, given a different coach, and given a different collection of teammates, where he's not the oldest guy in the room, really, which is what he is.
Right.
Crazy enough, 27 years old, but he's basically the oldest guy, most tenured player in the room. So he has his own thoughts on things, but that was kind of the main. It took a lot of I would say the Dillon Brooks saga of the last month, leading into the playoffs and in the end of that Lakers series, took a lot of eyes away from some of the other problems that the Grizzlies had in that final series against the Lakers. And I think, it may have covered up a little bit about some of our guys, shrinking in the. I wouldn't say shrinking is probably too strong of a word, but I do think it opened up the conversation for the Grizzlies to address some issues. I think there's some holes in the roster that need to be addressed. If you've got young guys that you don't feel comfortable playing in the playoffs, you've got to either really figure out if you're going to continue to, throw youth at this at this roster, or look at veterans. And so, that's kind of, I think, where, taking Brooks out of the equation, the Grizzlies moving forward will need to address kind of that. He will leave a hole in the roster. We'll see if they'll do a trade, if they'll address it with somebody there. But I think that it did cover up a little bit of the spoiled end of the season for the Grizzlies.
Right. Right. I guess we'll see. But that's a good segue into the Bucks, right? Firing Bud, right? I
Maybe
didn't
the
see
new
that coming.
assistant coach for the Grizzlies. Maybe a new assistant coach for the Grizzlies, Mike Budenholzer.
Maybe so.
There was
Did
some
we switch?
chatter
Could
about
we
that.
switch coaches? Right.
Yeah,
Let's just.
well, I don't. Yeah, I think he could be next to Jenkins on the bench. If we're gonna keep a Budenholzer disciple, I'd rather not replace him with Budenholzer himself. I'm
Fair.
still
That's fair.
not 100% sold on Taylor Jenkins being the championship coach for the Grizzlies. I do like him. I do think he, is going to eventually get the job done. But like you said, Budenholzer was let go yesterday. The report came out from Milwaukee after they got eliminated by the Miami Heat as an 8 seed, or they were the 1 seed and Miami the 8 seed. Won a championship 2 years ago. Do you think it's a right call? Do you think it's too soon?
So I have to think that there was something else going on with with Bud and the front office. I would say. I think for what they had this year, right? Yeah, Giannis and the team, there was a lot of injuries on their team, right, throughout the season, and they ended
Yeah,
up getting
Middleton
that
was
number
out for a
one
lot.
seed.
Yeah.
Right, Middleton was out for a while, right? So navigating through that with the players that you had, albeit in the East, right? You were above the Celtics and the 76ers in terms of the regular season. So I think that speaks to a lot in itself. And you didn't really do yourself any, or not, he didn't do himself any favors, but you really didn't. The cards didn't fall your way in the playoffs. Giannis was hurt, right? He probably wasn't at 100%, right? And we've all seen Jimmy Butler kind of go into this crazy mode when he enters the playoffs in terms of like he's gonna be that guy. So I think when you throw all the pieces together, it didn't really make sense to me that they would let go of Bud this. I want to say this early in his run with the Bucks, but it just felt kind of quick.
Yeah. No, I agree. When you strip out, like, if you are a Bucks fan, or maybe a diehard Bucks guy, or someone that's a diehard Giannis fan, like, maybe I've seen dissenting opinions about Bud over the years. Like, he did the championship washes away a lot of deficiencies and a lot of problems with people. Like obviously, but it is a championship. It's not, it's not a Band-Aid on a. It's like that's what you all play for. So he did get you he did get the Bucks to the pinnacle. They won the title, right? So it isn't like he tricked everybody into not thinking he was a good coach. He won the ultimate chip. But I think there has been over the past, even before that, during that season, there was a lot of murmurs about whether or not he was the guy to get the job done. And if you look back at that title run, I'm not trying to take it away because you win the title, you win the title. Things happen throughout the season. But it was, they were very close to losing to the Nets in that semifinal series. KD and Kyrie. Kyrie got hurt. KD foot on the line, the famous shot that would have put him up by one, but it tied the game instead. There was a lot of people that thought that the Bucks were going to lose that series, and then he would have definitely been gone that year, most likely. So then you win the title, you go against a Phoenix team who I believe Chris Paul was dealing with some stuff in that series. Just not really a strong team. Like we saw the following year that Suns team get, kind of embarrassed by Luka Doncic and a one-trick pony Mavs team. And so, that wasn't the strongest championship run. They didn't beat the Warriors. They didn't beat a LeBron-led team. They didn't beat any of these powerhouses of the past, few seasons. And, then you follow that up losing I believe they lost in the second or the conference finals last year to the Celtics, or the second round to the Celtics. And then this year, just kind of an embarrassing first round. Given the context that you mentioned, I think it is important. I just think that if you just look at the stats, you're like, how would you fire this coach? Like he's had all these wins, right. He's had all the success, but I think it's the, noticing that there's certain things, like Giannis mentioned it in his final interview, that there's some adjustments that they needed to make. And I think he was hinting at, maybe there's a different way that this team needs to play and be built going forward. And I think you're going to, sometimes just changing the voice in the room, it really does work wonders for people. I mean, we've seen teams completely turn around their fortunes by just having a new guy sitting on the bench. I mean, Toronto, Nick Nurse, first season, they won a title. They traded for Kawhi, but that wasn't a cakewalk of a season by any means. He did the job. Nurse is also a name that has been brought up as potentially taking over in Milwaukee too.
So and you bring actually up a good point, Nick Nurse. I think I saw a stat where it was more so like the last 4 NBA champions, only Steve Kerr remains in play as a head coach for his respective team. So it's always, when you reach the top, it's always the longest journey or the quickest journey down from the top is like, it's what have you done for me lately, right? When you win a championship and you want to capitalize, especially when you have a star like Giannis, you're going to want to keep the foot on the gas. So I do agree. There's a lot in play where, I feel like, sure, could it be quick? But like you said, having another voice in the room is sometimes gains a better perspective on, how do we need to go about certain things.
Yeah. And I'll say this too. It's much easier to convince yourself that the voice in the room is what needs to be changed. And it's much easier to do that than to change your roster. So, they've got to collect. I mean, they're in the luxury tax. They've got an interesting situation to navigate. Chris Middleton, I believe, has a player option. He could be a free agent if he wants, or he's basically going to be treated like that until he takes that option. You've got Giannis going to be up for extension soon. I think Brook Lopez is up for an extension. So it's in today's NBA, it's much harder to change your roster without being, really getting, really working the phones on trades and really getting creative. It's much easier to say, look, we're going to try something different from the head coaching position, and maybe with these same pieces, we can look different going forward. We can look more dangerous, or something else can be extracted from these ancillary pieces that haven't been extracted before, or maybe we can build ourselves into a more deadly playoff squad of guys. So I think that's what they're looking at. We'll see what they do. Nurse would be interesting just because he kind of seems like more of a hard ass, honestly. And he plays his guys a ton of minutes in Toronto. Not everything he did in Toronto worked. They won the championship. They haven't really done much since. But he plays his guys a ton of minutes. That's one of his things. That's one of the things Bud has been criticized for, of like not getting, not even in the playoffs, like not playing his stars major minutes. the Bud disciples do the same thing. Taylor Jenkins does that as well.
Well,
It seems like Jenkins and Darvin Ham,
if you
who
get
also is on that bench, have started to be more adaptable. Like Darvin Ham playing AD like 44 minutes and LeBron 40 minutes in game one against the Warriors. They seem to be taking a note that they need to change that. Bud still never really did that. So,
well,
but
if you give Nurse,
interesting
you know,
there. Huh?
speaking of Nurse, like if you give Nurse, you know, he instantly gets a better team. So you know, maybe that is the right move.
Right. I think he would probably be happy. I mean, if you're giving me an opportunity to get probably more money than I was making coaching the best player in the world potentially here with Giannis, I'm
Done.
gonna take that gig and figure the rest out later. So that's kind of, there wasn't a ton of breaking news outside of the playoff series. There was one thing I wanted to touch on in the Lakers. Okay, let's go Lakers Warriors. Series tied 1-1. Lakers tied up the series last night, or excuse me, the Warriors evened the series last night. A couple of things that I've noticed in that series, you know, it seems, I honestly don't really know how I feel about either team. Like, I went into it thinking that the Warriors would be who I would want, who I would feel comfortable picking in that series. Game one changed that. I actually don't think the Warriors have that many pieces they can go to. It now seems like JaMychal Green may be a starter going forward for the Warriors. And I just honestly weirdly feel better about the Lakers roster and the different ways that Darvin Ham has addressed games in the series. Like, he seems to be coaching a very similar to Ty Lue, where it's like, I'm going to go in here knowing that I can win any game. I can make an adjustment and win a game. I have LeBron James. I have Anthony Davis. I can work these ancillary pieces and get them in the right positions to succeed. And in a weird way, I feel like he's more malleable than Kerr seems to want to be with the Warriors. And I don't know that the Warriors have the confidence in those guys, in their role players, that the Lakers have in theirs.
No, I think outside of Steph Curry and Clay, you can't really trust anybody with offense, right? Like, sure, okay, Jordan Poole, he'll give you some good nights, but like night in night out, he's not one of the guys that's going to give you 30 points.
No, I have no
I think
faith
when
in
you
Jordan Poole, by the way.
I have no faith in Jordan Poole. So like it's like, you know, they have the two best guys on the floor, right? AD I feel like is the best player on the floor right now, right? In terms of like right now, right? He can go out and give you 30 points at any point. He can get every rebound. He can make every shot that I feel like he wants to inside and out. So when you put them into that position, like who's going to guard him, right? You mentioned JaMychal Green. Like, sure, that might give you a little bit more size, but like, is Kevon Looney going to be the one shutting down AD? I don't think so, right? So
No.
when you put the pieces next to each other, like right, if we were picking a pickup game squad, you know,
Mm-hmm.
AD is definitely going first in my book. So I feel a
Yeah,
lot more
AD and
comfortable with that Lakers offense.
yeah, exactly. And he, Draymond had a little bit of success guarding him in game two, but that was the classic AD game, take a game off. Like he did it in game two
100%.
versus the Grizzlies. He did it. He's done it his entire career. He's still impressed me in the playoffs, but and they had some different schemes against him yesterday. It wasn't. AD's one of those players where if you let him do the same thing back-to-back games and dominate, he'll go back and dominate back-to-back games. But if you change up a look or slightly, he's the type of guy who over the course of his career has been comfortable playing a back seat to other players on the team and be like, oh well, I just don't have it tonight, or it's just not going to work for me tonight. I'm gonna try to work, be a role player for this team instead of like, inserting himself into the main storyline. And you're right. I just feel like in a weird way. It's like I was off of LeBron early in the series, rooting for the Grizzlies, I guess I wanted myself to believe that LeBron didn't have it left, but maybe I was wrong. And I honestly feel in a weird way that he's reaching down into the depths and he's more motivated to beat Steph Curry than Steph Curry may be motivated to beat him. Not to take away from Steph. I'm just saying Steph's a great competitor and he wants to beat the Lakers. Don't get me wrong there. I just feel like LeBron may have this extra little bit because he's closer to the end of his career and he set the scoring record this year. People still, refer to him as the second best player. Like I feel like there may just be a little bit more oomph behind his motivation. And he's also feeling confident with this team. You can tell on the court that he's confident in these guys. We haven't had too many of the classic, LeBron freakouts where he's yelling at his teammates like we've seen over the past few years. So I'm really interested in the rest of the series. I think it's going to be 6 to 7 games at least. I think they'll probably split the games in LA, but I wouldn't be surprised if they went back to Golden State, Lakers 3, Warriors 1, and like they did with the Grizzlies and winning both those games at home.
Yeah.
It wouldn't surprise me.
Right. No, I think that, and we get a front row seat to it to watch them when they played the Grizzlies. But I feel like what has surprised me the most at this point is their defense. Their defense is what's keeping them in these games. I think they're playing almost with a chip on their shoulder, saying, "Hey, you guys counted me out the entire year, right? We started out 2-10. The projections of us making the playoffs were abysmal until the second half of the season, right? Once they got to the All-Star break, they were like, all right, well, I guess we'll start playing now."
Hey, what up, everybody? Jumping in here to say me and Blake recorded about 10 or 15 more minutes than this, but his phone overheated, so we have to cut that part. The rest of it didn't upload. So we really just talked about the end of the discussion on the Lakers and Warriors series, and then kind of quick thoughts on the rest of the playoff series. But we can cover that later in another episode. Wanted to let you guys know we're planning to record at least like an episode a week moving into the rest of the playoffs and the off season. I'm going to be doing some more shorts content as well as, just the occasional video, jumping into something, hot topics, stuff like that. So leave some comments. I'd love to hear what you'd like to see, and appreciate you tuning in and letting us know. So likes and subscribes are appreciated, and we'll talk again soon. Peace.